Afternoon, YouTubers. I'm having a bit of a lazy day today, but I'm never too lazy to help you guys. So here's another video to help you liberate your minds. So today I want to talk about mental health traps. What do I mean by that? I mean, I want to help you to avoid certain pitfalls or cycles, negative cycles that we can fall into when it comes to mental health and the mental health industry, shall we say. So the first thing I want to talk about are support groups. And I have no problem with support groups. I am a big advocate for human connection, for being able to share and to be able to support each other and to connect in that way. However, you've got to be careful about which groups you decide to join because there are quite a few toxic groups out there. What do I mean by toxic? I mean, instead of it being a support group, it's almost like a bit of a competition to see who has the worst mental illness or past or life. It becomes a bit of a pity party or a competition, and it's certainly not uplifting, right? Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with telling your story or venting to a point, but at that point, once you've got that done, it's then about, well, what are you going to do about this? How do we support each other? What's the solution? Like, what's worked for you? What's worked for me? Let's share ideas. Let's work forward. Let's look at some of these answers rather than just literally talking about the problem the whole time and then leaving the session feeling really depressed, really negative, right? There's a certain energy in those kinds of rooms, right? And if you're really sensitive to that, you'll pick up on it. And whether you're sensitive or not, you will feel it. And also, think of it like this. You know, when someone goes into prison, for example, for a simple crime, might be something very minor, and then comes out and goes and commits all kinds of other crimes. We really are, we grow into the kind of people we surround ourselves with, right? The kind of environments, the kind of people, the kind of conditions, the kind of conversations, all of these things really matter. So just choose carefully about where you decide to invest your time and your attention, especially, you know, if you've been through a tough time and you're feeling very vulnerable. Going into the wrong kind of support group can actually make a problem worse, right? Not naming and shaming any groups in particular, but we've come a long way since things like AA were created. No, I'm not knocking the concept of that. Like I say, I think it's great that people that are going through the same thing can get together. But there are some very unhelpful dogma, shall we say, attached to that. Some ideas like getting people to feel shame and to label themselves and to, you know, put the responsibility to a higher power. Now, I'm a very spiritual person, so I don't have a problem with that. But what if you're not religious, right? What if you're not spiritual? What if you're someone that feels really out of place having to say these kind of mantras and things like that in that environment where you're made to feel really terrible about what you've done, which of course triggers the root cause, which of course then goes round again. You're going to hit the bottle because you get to it's a bit of a cycle, right? So again, I'm sure that AA is good for some people, but I'm just saying there are some aspects to it that I have people that come to me for therapy that have said actually in some ways it made them feel worse about themselves, which made them go and be destructive and all the rest of it. There are things like saying that once they've fallen off the wagon, they have to hit rock bottom. Like again, like it's very, very strange and a bit outdated, right? So it is what it is, not judging that. Some people find it helpful, and if you do, fair enough. But I believe that getting to root cause and releasing the things that drive your need to drink and finding new alternatives like connection, you would be better off going to a group where there's a hobby or some kind of really positive activity that you could get involved with, like a walking group or an arts and crafts group or whatever it is like that, when everyone's, you know, happy to be there, the energy's good, you're doing new things to instead, like you're working towards something and finding new coping strategies. That would probably do you a lot more good. Anyway, enough on that. Next thing I want to talk about is misdiagnosis and prognosis. So what's the difference? What are these things? Diagnosis is when you go to a specialist and they basically give you I suppose you would I call it a diagnosis. Like, they tell you what's going on with you, whether it be for your physical health, mental health, whatever it is. But we got to be really careful with this, right? You can call it white man or like, what is it, the white coat syndrome, when somebody in a white coat in a place of authority starts telling you what's wrong. Now, of course, if they've done a medical test and they can see something there, then that's obviously a fact. You can see that on the chart or whatever it is. But in some cases, some people are getting misdiagnosed, right? And when you get misdiagnosed and then you take that as a fact and you don't get a second opinion and you start living into that. And of course, a lot of people start Googling all kinds of things and then start like measuring up and saying, oh, I've got that. So we've got to be a bit careful about, like, it's wonderful that we've got all of this information at our fingertips. And it's great that we have specialists to go to. But, not everybody, with the way the health service is right now, right? They don't have a lot of time. They're very stressed. The resources are low. Their pays are, there's a lot of reasons why things can get missed or misdiagnosed and all the rest of it. And that goes for mental health as well. If somebody says to you, oh, it sounds like you've got X, and you start living into that as if that's a fact, not great. I was misdiagnosed with dyslexia really late in life. And thankfully, I discovered actually it wasn't dyslexia at all. It was just severe anxiety. It was a trauma response as well. And therefore, whenever I was doing something like mathematical or whatever it was, my brain would just go into fight or flight. And of course, I couldn't add up, spell, whatever it is. You're in a freeze state right then, right? So get a second opinion, right? And also, don't forget that there is a lot of things out there that aren't really publicized in the mainstream, right? So don't give up. And that's another thing that, unfortunately, a lot of traditional, I guess you would call them avenues, say, is that they will often just say, here's a tablet for this, or you're going to have to just learn to live with that. Like, I bet you guys didn't realize that a lot of allergies and hypersensitivity states can actually be fully resolved, right? Hay fever, things like that. Now, I'm not saying I can cure the condition. I'm saying I can help you to resolve the root cause, which means the physical condition often disappears. Like pain management, arthritis, these kinds of things. You can't necessarily cure the arthritis, but you can switch off the pain signal. So instead of just living in pain or living and suffering, do some research, right? There's a lot of things out there that can be resolved that we're told can't. I remember when I first got into the mental health industry, a lot of people were talking about panic attacks as if there was nothing that could be done about that. It's one of the most easy things to resolve. You can stop panic attacks, and yet people live their whole lives suffering like that. So what's the difference between a diagnosis and a prognosis? So diagnosis is saying this is what is going on for you now, and they might do tests and then prove that and show that and all the rest of it. But a prognosis is then that expert saying what you can expect to happen, right? So imagine you get like a prognosis of cancer, and then they say you've probably got a couple of months to live. That's the prognosis. Now, one of them is probably a fact because they can measure it, they can show you on the tumors or whatever it might be. But the prognosis is purely their opinion. It's purely their estimation, right? But of course, the power of the belief, just like the power of the placebo effect, if you believe that, a lot of people will tend to die in a couple of months' time. It's the ones that actually go away and say, I'm not having that. And I've seen hundreds of cases. I do a lot of research where people have been given a death sentence and told they've only got a couple of weeks, months, whatever to live, and they're healthy now. They've beaten their cancer. They've lived through all of that. And it happens more than you might think. So again, be careful of prognosis. Diagnosis, take it seriously, but if you make the right adjustments to your life, there's a very good chance you could turn it around, even in something that's quite far gone. So, and don't go looking for yourself, right? Go to an expert rather than trying to diagnose yourself, because again, then you can start to create certain things. That's the power of the mind. So just something to be aware of. The next thing I want to talk about is something I call Marta Syndrome, where people almost wear their problems like a badge of honor, right? Like their stress. And almost as if to say, the more stressed I am, the harder I've worked, or I have to feel a certain way. I have to work this many hours. And again, it becomes a bit of a competition. They don't ever have any self-care. And when other people, they can see other people having a holiday or a break or meditating or doing something for and they're like wimps, and things like that. And it's almost like they're kind of working their guts out, and they're kind of creating, they're having, often what they'll happen is they'll have these bursts of productivity, they'll burn out, and then they'll crash and be out the game for a long time. But they can't get out of this cycle because it's been beaten into them sometimes, or it just drilled into them that you've got to work hard and you haven't got time to waste. When someone says, oh, I don't have time to meditate, I don't have time to have a day off, I don't have time for sick days, and all these kinds of things. If you do not, I this is my mantra, and I get this from various other specialists that I follow. Self-care is not a luxury, right? It's actually a necessity. And we have a cycle of, we go from drive to stress, right? But there is another one. So if you're just going drive, stress, at some point, if you push yourself too hard, you will crash. You need to make it more of a triangle, and then there's recovery, right? So it's drive, stress, recovery, drive, stress, recovery. And if you get that right and you're in balance, then you're going to be a lot healthier. And here's the irony. If you did make time for that self-care every day, and you did put yourself first instead of putting everybody else before you, you have more to give, right? The quality of your work is better. Would it not be better to work smart instead of working hard, right? So instead of working 18 hours a day and kind of churning out okay work and just about getting by, would it not be better to work half that time, but when you are working, you're more productive, the quality of your work is better, and you're, really hitting all those deadlines and having extra time to then spend on yourself. There's that expression where you can't, pour from an empty cup, but if your cup is overflowing, then you're at your best for everybody, right? So put yourself first. It's not selfish, it's actually selfless, because then you've got more to give. If you're someone that cannot say no, think of it like this, right? If you're literally having so many projects that you cannot give any one of them your best, are you doing them a favor by saying yes? Or are you actually giving them substandard like quality of work? So, just be mindful of that. So the last one I want to talk about today is secondary gain. So what is secondary gain? You may have heard that expression before. It's basically when there's a reason for you, whether you're consciously aware of it or not, to keep something in place that may not be for your highest good, right? So again, it can come back to the idea of potentially wearing your mental health as a badge of honor, right? And the reason, and you can check this. So there's two kinds of this, right? There's when you're doing it actively or consciously. And that, I can give you an example of that, is when someone is coming to me, not because they want to come, it's because their parent has made them come, or their husband or wife has kind of forced them into it and put pressure on them to come and get some therapy or coaching. And you can tell they don't want to be there, right? They will purposely sidestep or mismatch what I'm asking them to do when I'm giving them directions, right? And you can't help someone like that because they are actively resisting. They don't want to be there. They're not going to follow the instructions. So they're going to do whatever they can to sabotage the process. So that's when you're doing it consciously. So there's nothing I can do for those. But what I can tell you is that the other kind is when you're doing it sort of passively or unconsciously. And it might be because you're terrified, right? You're terrified about what life looks like without whatever it is going on. So let's give you a couple of examples. Imagine that you are someone that has pain, right? Pain, back pain. And because of that, you are unable to work. And you have a lot of people coming in to support you. You've got a great support network. You have people being really thoughtful and bringing you things and all the rest of it. And if you're not careful, you can fall into the trap of not wanting, whether it's conscious or unconscious, to give up all of the benefits that you're getting, right? So, you've got to kind of ask yourself, what do I stand to lose, right? What do I gain from having this issue? And then you could list all those kind of things I've mentioned. And then, of course, you can flip that and say, okay, and if I release the pain, I'm no longer in pain, What do I stand to lose? Right? And you can see whether that might be like an insight to suddenly go, oh, actually, yes, maybe I haven't been doing my exercises and my physiotherapy and taking my medication and all the rest of it, or trying to get better, because actually there's part of me that actually quite likes things exactly the way they are. Now, in a more toxic way, I don't like using the word toxic, but in another way, think of it like this, and you'll see people like this online all the time that kind of have developed a whole following or a community or business surrounding their mental health issue, right? Whether it's depression or whether it's PTSD or any other kind of condition. And they have followers, they have dopamine hits every time they get like likes. You know, they've developed an identity out of it. There's a status thing, there's opportunities, they get to go and speak on panels, all of these things, right? So if they actually then get better, they're not part of that conversation anymore. How do they continue to keep that business, that identity, that status, all of those benefits coming to them? So it can then become this destructive, you know, wearing it, as I say, as a badge of honor, as some kind of status symbol, and kind of preaching. And instead of trying to resolve it, and I will say this with confidence because, I've done this for long enough to know that most mental health issues can be solved, right? I'm not talking, maybe things like psychosis, or when people like schizophrenia, things like that, right? But that's really top end, right? Things have moved on a lot since then. And, it's not just the idea of giving someone a tablet anymore is always the idea, because this is the thing. Doctors are very ready, because they don't know what to do, is to just give them tablets, right? And actually, sometimes that can do more harm than good, in the sense that it numbs the pain, it numbs the feelings, it may cover it over, but it doesn't resolve anything. And they become tolerant to it. The other thing is there are some horrendous side effects. And one of the other things is when they do come and see me and they're on a very high dose, we can't do any work because they're not with it. They're not there. They're not stable. They can't think. They can't feel. And you have to feel it to heal it. How are you going to measure the difference when something's been resolved, right? So again, it really comes down to kind of asking yourself, are you using your mental health, or is your mental health using you? Like, are you falling into some of these traps? Because at the end of the day, it is a choice, right? There are things that need to be in place for you to want to get better. You've got to want it. Because even when someone comes to me, I don't do it for them. I just help them, I guide them to get better, and I help them to help themselves. So like, I always use the analogy of that mental health personal trainer. So in the sense that just like with a physical fitness personal trainer, they'll give you the exercises, they'll guide you through a process. They might even spot the weights and help you with the load, but they're not lifting it for you. And if you think that someone's going to do it for you, or if you don't even want to lift those weights because you're quite happy with who you are and with that thing, and you've made it into a whole identity, then you've got to ask yourself, what are you doing it for, right? So again, this isn't me kind of judging or preaching. Everyone's on their own journey. But for people out there, I just want to say that there's a whole alternative health market that works, right? Whether it be to do with physical health, mental health, all of the other kinds of things that go on in there, whether it be your diet, whether it be, fitness, whether it be alternative medicines and all kinds of things like that. And it really is now, there's not much of an excuse for not being healthy, in the sense that everything's out there. It just is, are you ready? Are you ready to change? Are you ready to take responsibility? And are you ready to stick with it and be consistent? And if you are, the people that come in and sit on the couch and have that attitude, they always get better, right? Because they've already made their decision, and the power of the mind is incredible, right? So I hope that's been helpful. I know I've kind of gone on a lot longer than I would normally. Guess I got carried away. But hope you found that helpful. Have a wonderful day, and I will be back soon with some more information. Take care.